Hi everyone, welcome to the Coding Zoo. This is your first time joining. My name is Shane and this is the HTML Building Blocks playlist. This is lesson number 10, and in today's lesson we're going to learn the difference in a div and a span. We're going to learn what a div is and what a span is and when to use each and when to avoid each. If that's something you'd like to learn, stick around. We're going to get right into it. Before we begin though, I just want to mention why we have the Coding Zoo. The Coding Zoo is a place that I created and my children created for us to learn how to program together. I'm a software engineer of about 15 years, and I was self-taught, and I am teaching my children, and we thought it would be a great idea to teach others. So if you are here to learn how to program, we'd love to have you with us and learning with us. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and we'll get back to you. Check out the codingzoo.com website. Let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so on my screen I have my Notepad++. You can use whatever editor you like. I have the index.html page open, and it has a link to a style sheet here. So I created this lesson 10 folder from this template. We create one each lesson. That way you have something to reference to go back and look and see how you did a certain thing in case you forget in the future. I definitely recommend that you actually do the code with us. That's a way to stick with you. The more you code versus just watching, the more it will stay in your memory, the more you'll remember how to use it. So let's get started. I'm going to go over here to the index, and first one we're going to use is a div. So a div basically doesn't have any semantic meaning. It's just a divider. It's a div. It doesn't really tell any meaning around what you're putting inside of it. So a div element is created with div. So div, and usually you want to give it an ID, and that ID should give it some meaning. So ID equals, and I'm going to put main. This is my main div, and this will be my main paragraph. And I'm going to close the div element. Okay, so I've created a div. Opened up my browser here. This will be my main paragraph. So this sentence is surrounded with a div. You can't see it, so let's fix that. So a div is a block element. A block element is kind of separated from the content surrounding it. It actually most of the time will take up a complete line unless you put a width on it, and it usually will put anything after that on the next line. Let's go ahead and put some color around that. I'm going to do a type selector, and I'm going to find that div. And I'm going to give it this CSS property. Let's give it a border. So let's do 1 pixel. Let's do solid, black. Okay, I'm going to click refresh. And there you go. So now you can see a border around my complete div. And you'll notice how it takes up the whole line. And if I were to put anything in the HTML page afterwards, it's going to make it go to the next line. There we go. See how it went to the next line. So that's a div. It's a way of separating your data, categorizing your data. It doesn't have any semantic meaning, so the ID you give it should provide it meaning. Now, HTML5 has some new elements such as main, footer, heading, aside, section. Where possible, you should use elements like that. Those are block elements. Also, the difference in them and div is they have semantic meaning. Footer, it has a meaning. You know what a footer is. Footer is what goes at the bottom. It's the foot, right? A div doesn't have that semantic meaning. You have to give it to it by using an ID. So if there's an element, a block element, that can provide the same feature of separating data the same way, and it has more semantic meaning, you should use it instead of div. So let's talk about span. Span is just like div, except it's not a block element, it's an inline element. For the most part, you should try to avoid span if at all possible. And again, use elements that have more semantic meaning. Let's show you what span does. So I'm going to write a sentence. Okay, so in this sentence, let's say I want to separate Java and JavaScript from the rest of the sentence. Well, if I do that with a div, it's going to put it on the next line. It's not going to allow me to keep the sentence all together. A span is an inline separation. So a span will let me group those words without pushing it to the next line. It's an inline element. So span, and again, no semantic meaning, so I'm going to give it one. ID equals save it. Okay, so I refresh my screen. You can see I have Java and JavaScript. It's got a span around it. You can't see it. Let's go ahead and change that up some. I'm going to find that element by name or by the ID, so faved language. So I'm going to write an ID name selector. And I'm going to put the same kind of border around it. Click refresh, and there you go. You'll notice that I love to program in is not inside the span, and it doesn't have the border around it, whereas Java and JavaScript are inside the span and they have a border. This allows me to group those words together and separate them from the other data to give it more meaning, and also I can apply different styles to it that I don't want applied to the rest of the sentence. For example, I could make it to where these words are italicized, but why do that? Why would I do that if I can use a different tag like emphasized to do that, right? So wherever possible, don't use span, use other elements that have more semantic meaning. Emphasize has a semantic meaning. I want to emphasize Java and JavaScript. So a better way of doing this, instead of using span, now if you have to use span, use it, but a better way of doing this would be to use the EM tag for emphasize, right? So if I go here, instead of putting a style on the span to put italics, I can just wrap it in the emphasize element, emphasized, and there you go. Now it's in italics. So this is a case where instead of using the span, I should use a different element. So that's why I say try to use something that has more context. I want to emphasize something. Emphasize has meaning. Span doesn't have meaning around the data. It's just a grouping thing. So that's all there is to it. Div and span. Again, you want to use other elements where possible to have semantic meaning if they do the same thing. HTML5 provided a lot of those. We'll go over those in future lessons. I hope this was helpful to you. If so, I'd love for you to check out our other lessons. If you'd like to learn how to program and program with us, click subscribe and click the bell for notifications. If you have any questions at all, leave them below. I will get back to you. So question for today, are you aware of any of the HTML5 elements that I'm talking about, footer, heading, and all that? Or do you know how those work? Would it be good to do a video on that to show you how those work? Let me know. Again, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.